Hey!
Let me say this again in Irish. Dihuit.
Yes, very good.
Bye.
Where'd you learn that?
I'm super pleased to be starting this process with you. And I've learned recently how to do Zoom in a way that's more inclusive and accessible for people with disabilities. So I've enabled captions, so they're going around now. And also I've learned that it's good to start by describing yourself and the surroundings around you. So would you mind doing that? I'll go first so that you can have an example if you haven't done this before. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So hello, this is Rita speaking here. I am a white woman. I have long black hair, straight and put up in a kind of sort of ponytail on top of my head, and it's shaved from the sides. I'm what else? Oh, I have glasses, seeing glasses, and they have black frames. I'm wearing kind of like a white top. You might be able to see a few flowers peeking through my Muji jeans apron that I've had for years, that I love, that I hardly ever use. And in front of me, you can also see a wooden table, some notes. I'm holding a pen, and behind me, just a white background, and I'm in my kitchen. Okay, over to you guys.
Do you want to go first, Julie?
Okay. Hi, I'm Julie Lockett. I'm a white woman. I am sitting here in our wood-fired bakery, which is at the front of our house. So I can feel some nice heat on my back from our wood-fired oven. We don't have a fire lighting at the moment, but because it's a heat-retaining oven, it still gives out some heat. I'm wearing glasses as well. I've got grey hair. I'm wearing a pale blue top. And I'm sitting next to my husband here, Joe. I'll introduce you.
Hi, and I'm Joe, and yeah, I'm a white male, age 50, grey haired, shorter because Julie cut it there the other day, wearing a blue shirt, specially chosen for the red background, so it can be seen in here, and it can be used on Zoom. Usually we would wear a check shirt, but it doesn't work well on a camera. And but the check shirts don't show up the dirt as much when you're in a baking or cooking situation, hence chef's checks. And yeah, we're sitting in our bakery here. I was just remembering exactly this time 10 years ago, we started building the bakery. This was all just fields around us. And it was on Easter Monday, we started digging out the foundations for this bakery and then to build the oven. And we spent me and my friend Mando, it was started Easter Monday 10 years ago. We started building all this building and the oven. So little 10th anniversary.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Brilliant. Thank you both. So I'm thinking, if that works with you, that maybe we start with your lesson to me, and then after 20 minutes, half an hour, how long it takes, then we'll switch and I'll do my choreographic propositions for you both. What do you think?
Okay, yeah.
That's fine.
Great. Okay. So I'm all yours.
Okay.
Shoot.
Good to see you, Rita. So usually, first of all, when anybody comes in and is learning with us, I always ask them, so do you just want to, at the end of this, the 8 weeks that we're here, bake a loaf of bread or bake bread in between it? Or would you like to bake bread ongoing, know how to bake bread and be baking bread? Because the approach is slightly different.
So the honest answer to that is I don't know the answer. Okay. So I'm embarking in this as somebody who, I don't know if I'm going to enjoy it. I don't know what it's going to mean to me. So the honest that answer is that I don't know if this is going to be a one-off or if this is going to become a practice that I will continue.
And would you like to learn how to bake bread, as in, and everything that's involved in it, and then and your approach to baking, your approach to food then? Or would you like to just bake a loaf of bread during this course?
I would like the first one, the process. I would like to kind of explode it and understand it.
That's good to know. Yeah, because I'll have to know how to approach you and all the learning within it and the knowledge to share with you, which will be a different mindset than if you're just going to, like, we'll just bring you through steps of, and you'll end up with a loaf of bread. That's easy. The other one that you leave at the end of the 8 weeks, that you will have an understanding of baking and why we bake and the knowledge to do all these things. Whether you do it or not afterwards is up to you. But yeah, hopefully you'll have a passion for it at the end. Okay. So really, we wanted to start off with we sent you a box of stuff.
You did.
Yeah.
You delivered this to me this morning, and shall I open it?
Open it up. We start taking it. Talk you through what's going to be in it. And you were saying you've no experience in baking at all?
I bake cakes.
Okay.
So.
Do you ferment at all?
No, I don't. I've never done that.
Oh.
Okay. Woo! Okay, there's lots of things here. What do I do now? What do you want me? Do you want me to take everything out?
Take it all out. Yeah.
Okay, there is. So I'm just going to take it all out.
Yeah.
And then you can talk me through it. Woo! This is so exciting. Oh, wow. Oh, wait. One at a time. Very heavy this morning. Now I'm going to move the box.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Excellent.
So look.
So that's going to get you through your first 6 weeks of it anyway, of what we're doing here, and get you baking a good few loaves of bread. And then, as we were saying to you, over these 8 weeks, we're going to bring you from milling your own flour and then getting to understand that, so you have a relationship with grain. And then you'll be baking some loaves of, you're going to be fermenting that to build, you're going to build your own sourdough starter, make a few loaves of bread at home, and then we'll teach you how to light a fire, and then we'll be baking it on that fire at home. And during Bealtaine, we celebrate the fire as well. That's one of our fire festivals. So there would have been a large fire up on Ishnach during at the beginning, so as part of the Bealtaine festival, and that's usually in May. So as this progresses and we go into May into Bealtaine, then you also celebrate that fire at the end of this. So we combine all these into the food processes and the celebration of fire at the end of the baking.
Oh, that's beautiful. Can I just make sure I understood? So Bealtaine is the festival, is traditionally a festival of fire?
Yes, so there's four, so the different seasons in Ireland would be celebrated with different fires. And then, so you might know of like the Yule log, you know a Yule log, and you have your house and you have a flame on it. A candle stuck in a piece of, usually what's called pine. Did you see any of them this year? Do you know that concept? No?
No.
So often in Ireland at Christmas time, we would have a Yule log. So that'll be a candle on a piece of wood. So that's as part of celebrating the winter fire. And so we'll bring that. And then that fire is then, in May, that fire is brought, and another, one of the large fires is lit. The first one used to be lit on Ishna, which is near Tara, a large hill there. And then that was lit by the High King up there. And then from the surrounding mountains, other fires were preceded right across the country and light up the country. So that was the first one. Then you'd be able to see that fire from the next hill. A fire would be lit there and that would pass across the country. And then different woods are brought together during the different seasons and they celebrate as you would burn different woods and the fire is kept going all year round and different woods represent different seasons. So you can go off and you can read about that.
A little bit like, the Olympic fire that's kept burning from
Yeah,
one place to another.
Yeah, it would be like that, yeah.
Wow.
And so yes, we'll bring that element into it at the end because this is part of the Bealtaine. So we'll bring that in.
Right. Great.
If you're going to talk Rita through this stuff now,
Yeah.
I'm going to step out for a little bit. Is that all right, Rita? Cool.
That's fine.
And are you okay with that?
Yeah,
I'll stay
yeah.
around.
And where are you going to be so I can pull it back?
I'll just be around. I might even just sit out of shot for a bit.
Okay, Julie.
Okay.
I'll see you in a bit.
Do you want to move more into the middle of the shot?
So, it's like, what I really want to start off with is why do we eat this stuff? We're going to teach you to bake some bread. But why do we even eat it? It doesn't grow on trees. It doesn't exist naturally without us. So, Julie, and so it doesn't exist without us. So the humans would have hybridized different grasses over millennia and to be able to create different grains. So traditionally, so here's some rye here that we have here, and you have a packet of rye in front of you there.
Let me see. Is it the smaller packets? Is it the smaller?
Yeah, you've got a packet there of Irish rye grain. So that's organically grown Irish rye grain that you have there.
Oh,
And
this
you
is
got a packet-
Irish.
Yeah,
Irish grown.
yeah. So that was grown in County Louth, organically grown there. So we have some of that here. So here's a selection of wheat. And these wheat would have been really large. So these have a large root structure that be going off into the ground. And of course, the humans, we're up here, and we're going to get some of our nutrients out of the sunlight, and some of it we get out of the air, but everything else is locked up in the soil. So some people eat animals that eat the plants that are coming up out of the soil to get those nutrients, and those are just going to have to rely on eating the plants that come up out of it to get those nutrients in. So humans realized that by hybridizing wheat, rye, all these cereals, they would be able to store the nutrients throughout the year. These rye are around somewhere 10, 12%, maybe 14% proteins. They're full of carbohydrates. We have those sugars that are going to give us energy, and then loads of different trace minerals, magnesium, manganese, vitamin N, folic acid, all these. So what these started off as very thin grasses, through hybridization, people were able to create these different grains for them to get them through the winters. And around now, we'll be coming into the hungry gap where your winter store, anyone who's growing vegetables and like that would have realized that all their winter stores will be gone. And this year's crops haven't really started coming on. So there's usually a time here during the hungry gap where people would have eaten their stores. But the grains, they keep over a long time. And we want to be conscious as well of our grains. Now, wheat is now the number one crop that is used by humans globally. It's us as a society, as a civilization, we are grain-based. We moved from a nomadic system and the use of cereals made us stop moving it. So the whole idea that we rely on cereals is the basis of human existence now. And wheat has become the number one crop. It's overtaken cotton and corn, and rice is grown globally as the number one crop. So we get most of our energy as a species from eating wheat. So we're really reliant on it.
Sorry, can I ask you, Joe? So
yeah.
So the growing of grain is one of the reasons why humans stopped being nomadic.
Yeah.
and decided to settle. Is it?
Yeah. Yeah, and our whole and grain growing globally, it's the thing which as a species, because that's why it's written about so heavily, like in the Bible. It goes through what we have.
Yeah.
Companion is the person, the pan. So it's the person you share bread with. You have the bread of life. All these kind of descriptions about all of our time, like bread and grain growing is really based within us as a species now. So it really holds us together. We see how important it is right across Africa. That has caused riots. We had, during the 15th century, massive big riots in the revolution in France. We had different, and any times there was plague or anything like that, or any losses of famine, all based around, usually based around the loss of grains.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a really particular to us as a species, our relationship to grain. And we're going to, as we go through this, we're going to look at what's happened in modern times and really affected us, and why we've become so reliant on it. And now we've become very vulnerable as well as a species due to this over-reliance and due to the industrialization of it. And then we've started relying on such a few varieties of our crops that we've started looking back at old crops, and now we've started looking at new ones. So we will get to that in a few months.
Okay.
So as humans hybridize these grains, so what we're going to do is I'm going to bring you, so I want you to create your own flour for this. So you're going to project for about the next week until we come back. I think we're meeting again in a few days. So I want you to crush these grains that you have. So you've got 1 kilo of rye here. And that's why I've sent you out a mortar and pestle. So years ago, people, when they first started off, and we were doing some work, Real Bread Ireland, a network of bakers, we were doing some work with the archaeology department in UCD in Dublin, and they were showing us old milling systems. So traditionally, we would have had a very large flat rock, and then crushing those stones on these flat rocks to be able to create the flour. And the amount of energy it's going to take you. So I want you, so I have in front of me here some different piles of flour. And this one here, we have the grain. And then after I was crushing it for 5 minutes, we get it to around here. These are just 100 grams each. And then we're moving on, and you'll see it at 10 minutes, it's starting to crush down to this, starting to become finer. And then after around 15 minutes, we start getting it into kind of coarse flour. But of course, we need to ferment these grains to make them bioavailable to us, to release the nutrients, and to be able to make our bread. Because we have to create our own wild yeasts, and we're going to need the bacteria to do that. And we'll discuss all that probably next week when we go into fermentation. But
so next week is fermentation, yeah?
Yeah, we'll do fermentation next week. So just today, I just want to be talking about our raw ingredients on how we're going to create the flours that we're going to use over the next few weeks. So this rye here, as you're going to, but the amount of energy it's going to take you to just do 100 grams, so it'll take you about 15, took me about 15 minutes to do 100 grams. So you're going to be, so you're going to 15 to 20 minutes. So we have to do that whole kilo for next week. So that's going to be a few hours work in there.
Yeah.
And crushing that. And then just how difficult it was years ago. So when people started creating, deciding to grow these grains, how much energy it actually took to produce a kilo of flour. You'll probably use around 500 grams of it or so in one loaf of bread. And that might last for 2 days. But it's going to take you several hours just even to make that flour, to be able to do it, and then go through this process. And then as we moved on, so then people started creating different mills and utilizing horses or water power to be able to do this. But in Ireland, it still had up into the 50s, we had these, it was called a quern. So the 2 large flat rocks that would be crushed and rotated around each other. They were illegal in a large parts of the country because that meant if people were able to crush their own flour, they were able to create their own foods. And an awful lot of times they had no, although they used to grow food, it was owned by the landlord and they'd have to pay tithes. So they'd have to show them how much grains or whatever that they were producing was produced. And if they were keeping some of that for themselves to create their own flour, then the tithe wouldn't be, everything wouldn't be going to the Lord. So to prevent them from being able to crush that and mill that, the querns were made illegal and these to be smashed if they were found. So milling was also a very controlled process within society.
So like the control of food was sort of, and the control of people's means to mill their own grain.
Absolutely.
It's kind of used to control people, for the people with the land, with the power to keep others under control, really.
Yeah, so you would have had like even like the tenant farmers living a subsistence, but they would have to give the grain, the food that they grew, because they were on a lord's land. They would say the food all was owned by the Lord, and they could take a portion of it, but they had to declare all of it first of all. And so to make them stop it, so to control how much that they would keep themselves, they have no way of processing it. So they controlled the availability of the processing part of it, so that they couldn't take part of it and process it themselves. There was a secret society set up in France because, again, that happened in around the 15th century, and they had a lovely term, le pain se lève, the bread is rising, and that was their secret one. And we would, whenever we do kind of events around here, we change it into Irish, Páirrán na gCardú, the bread is rising, that's the idea. And so we can take these as in this, because a part of us that we would have, we're going to have you, the common loaf was a bread that we started to bring this back around 5 years ago. This idea of taking Irish rye, and we're going to blend it with strong flour. I'm going to talk you through this white flour here that we're going to be using here.
Okay.
Because what happened was, even within Ireland, the knowledge to be able to create food was taken away from them. Within Ireland, we have the popularity of using soda breads. Of course, this is the use of synthetic industrial chemicals. So those chemicals were invented around 150 years ago, made from crushed limestone, and then it's used in a really large industrial process. So none of that is created in Ireland. So we have to import all these industrial chemicals. So as us within a nation, because all of our understanding at home for home bakers and to be able to make bread was reliant on these synthetic industrial chemicals. People didn't know how to make, if those chemicals were stopped, people wouldn't be able to make that food. And we could see that even within, where at the beginning of the pandemic, people had no access to different flours, or they couldn't get soda, they couldn't get yeast. So they didn't know how to make bread without these other, reliant on these ingredients. And these ingredients are controlled by very large industrial chemical companies. And so for us as a nation, we were reliant on these chemical companies. So our idea by the common loaf was to bring back the common knowledge into us as a culture of how to ferment our grains and how to be making bread the way that people made bread for millennia. And then so that because that knowledge was taken away, and even the large bakeries would say, oh, we'll do the baking for you. So we'll hold that knowledge. And people didn't know how to either ferment, and they didn't, and bread completely changed. The sliced white pans that exist these days, made from the industrial process, the Chorleywood bread method, by using emulsifiers and all these different ingredients which people wouldn't know what are in them. And so that knowledge of even how to make a simple yeasted bread was lost. And yeasted baking would go back around 5,000 years ago. That goes back into the Egyptians, where they were brewing. So they would they had the bakeries next door to the brewery, and we were taking the brine off that. And then they would use the yeasts from the from brewing to be able to making their breads.
So so the two processes were connected. Yeah.
Back into Egyptian time, very long process. And we're just going to turn my phone off. That's whenever you're doing Zoom. So we can take that out. Yeah. So within Ireland, when we look back at old recipes in the big houses, they would have access to refined flour. We're going to look at some refining some flour here, and they would have had access to brewing. So they would have been making yeasted breads in there. But then downstairs, this is pre-famine in Ireland, because then downstairs they would have had to be just fermenting their food. So they would have in Ireland we would have large oat cake, reliance on oats, or more flat breads. But where they were making breads, they would have been sourdough breads. It would have been naturally fermented, because fermentation happens naturally with or without. And we'll look at that, as I say, next. And then it was only post-famine that we started putting in industrial synthetics. Bicarbonate soda was invented in the 1850s and it was then brought over to. So it's just that the post-famine food, and we had lost our access and a lot of our knowledge with the famine. And so people started, especially in Europe, taking on. It's quite difficult to keep a fermentation going if you haven't got refrigeration. So if you're living in a small place, somebody came along with a chemical and went, have a go at this in your bread, oh, people would jump on it. So it's going, you will see through our process of our fermentation how difficult it is. First of all, you're going to try and mill. So if you try and create some flour for yourself, and then we're going to try and ferment that and be making these breads.
Okay.
And how difficult it was for people. So why we've started using much more. So the difficulty you're going to have. So it's going to take you several hours to be able to do that kilo. Where people can just now, this is a little mock mill, a little industrial home mill, a stone mill, where I can just take so that took seconds to produce 100 grams of flour. Where this process, I wouldn't even be able to get it. It would take me maybe a half an hour at least to be able to get the flour this fine by hand, by milling it through stones or whatever, that 100 grams. So this way, technology really has benefited us as well. Although like people kind of hark back to, we use a wood-fired oven. We split our own wood to create these foods for us. Where by using technology as well, it can speed up our approach to it. So we're just going to.
Joe, can I say one thing?
Yeah.
So what this is making me think of is, you know, because of the kind of coal-based and nuclear-based and whatever electricity-based energy that we use, and everything we use machines for, we actually don't realize the immense energy that something takes. So
sorry, we should just suspect that somebody at the door here. I think is at the door or something like that. Thanks. Sorry, Rita, go ahead. Yeah.
Just saying that the cost, the immense energy that something takes, like you've just shown the difference between, it took you 15 minutes to mill 100 grams of flour manually, and it took you seconds to do it with something that's usually using energy.
Absolutely.
And, you know, electricity energy. And this is like one of those things that when you think about the climate breakdown and the kind of overuse of energy that we're doing, you know, it's one of those things that really, really brings it into focus, the amount of energy that a loaf of bread actually contains, you know, because you forget, if you use just an electricity mill, you forget, you don't realize it.
Although we look at the greatest part of the carbon footprint that goes into making a loaf of bread is the fertilizers that are used in making what you call it, kind of commodity grown wheat. And this is why we would only work with organic growers as well. So the transport, less than the transportation, it's less than the energy that goes into the baking of the bread, the milling of it. Most of it goes into the production of the nitrogen that goes into the soil then. Those chemicals, that's the greatest carbon footprint of a loaf of bread. It's actually is within those systems. But absolutely, when we see this, so this is what I want you, so a part of your understanding of these processes, how difficult it has been for people to make these breads. And then all of a sudden we started mechanizing these processes. And then we started industrializing them. And then there was like the world was in a crisis in the 50s, and the world was running out of food. So then there was a massive big change within after the Second World War. There was so much nitrogen left from making all the bombs. So within the process, it's changed. They were able to make nitrogen synthetically, and it started then. It was primarily made for making bombs. But then an awful lot of that was thrown on the soil, and there was an agrarian revolution where all the food jumped up. So our grains, where these used to be big tall wheat like that, they were all made into little stumpy wheat because the straw became so soft and they fell over. and all of a sudden that this process of making much smaller wheat, tying in with synthetic nitrogen, this gave the growth, a massive big growth in world population. So at a time it was seen as a wonderful thing. It enabled the feeding of the population, but it has absolutely created a global crisis for us now, which will be another thing we can discuss later on, the distribution of food. Because even though we say we're at max population, an awful lot of the food is being wasted. And we're going to discuss this part of it now. So we just milled that, and we're going through this. But you also have in your container, you have this strong white flour. So part of this is made from primarily Mars widgeon, which is an English grain. We bring this in from the UK.
Is it this one, Joe? Is it this one here?
In that packet, you can open that up and just feel the flour on the inside of it there. So that organic strong white flour.
Yeah.
And then this would usually have a protein content somewhere in around 10.5, maybe 11 in different years. In Ireland, the grains that grow in here are wheat, lower protein content because we don't have the really hot summers and the cold winters. So the role the miller was is to blend these wheats to give us these strong flours. An awful lot of time, the grains would be imported from Canada. The Ukraine would supply an awful lot of Europe. And the role of the miller then is to blend these grains to give us consistent flour. So this here is a blend of Mars widgeon, then there's some continental wheat. And then I think at the moment in there is Ukrainian, because the price of Canadian wheat has gone so expensive. And that the proteins in that are going to bind and give us our bread that's going to rise up. We'll look at that next week. But what I just want to show you here now, so we've got this white flour here. It's going to be easy to work with. But to make that, the mill will pass the crushed grains through different bolting cloths and sieves, and we sift out the bran and the germ.
Oh.
So here we have the endosperm, the center of the grain here, and this little pile here, like it. And beside it, Julie, would you be able to just slide over and we just compare these two here? It's this pile here.
Yeah.
We just bring over the camera here a little bit. Now, so we've separated out here the bran and the germ. This side here, we have the bran and the germ. So these are all the nutrients there in the plant. This bit here, all the flavor, all the nutrients. This here, the endosperm in the center of it. So that flour that you have there is on the endosperm in the center. So the miller will have removed about 25% of the grain. Mostly it gets fed off then for animal feed, and the miller so the grower, although they've grown whole grains and if they're milling it and then selling it onto you, you're removing the nutrients and all the flavor from it to give us the white flour from the inside of it. So you'll see the amount of energy that are going to. So these are that it's gone into, will have gone into creating a wholemeal flour, and then you won't have to sift this. It'll be too emotional for you to remove that bran and germ and feed it off some animals, whatever. So we'll be using all the wholemeal part of your part. But we can see here, this endosperm here, this. So these are questions that we have to ask then. Are we by using white flour, by making white bread, sugar and protein, basically in this part, and some starches, remove the nutrients. So we then are feeding to animals the nutritious part of these grains. The humans have spent millennia creating, and we end up just using the sugary parts of it because that suits our flavors, and we throw away the nutrients from this side. So
That's crazy.
Pardon me?
That's crazy.
Yeah. This is what we do. Of course it's crazy.
Crazy that this is what we do.
Yeah, people eat white bread all the time. No nutrients. And then they have to put the nutrients back in synthetically. And you'll see kind of on the side of it, added vitamin D, added vitamin E, added vitamin, all the different vitamins, all the different folate, because we removed all them, because they're all on this side of it. We remove all them, we feed them off animals, and then we just keep this side of it. So because this is what's going on with the flours, and we'll discuss all that in the fermenting of it, and this is how we've got to this place. So for next week, you can have crushed down the grain and just try and relate to the energy, like what has gone into that people decided to crush these grains to ferment them to be able to making breads, and how much energy it's going to take you to, you'll be able to do it about 100 grams at a time. And you're going to use that mortar and pestle there to be able to mill your own flour. And so for next week, you're going to come back with a nice bag freshly milled flour. We're going to ferment that a little bit.
And that sounds amazing. But Joe, how do I go like this? What's the movement?
I find a bit of pounding. A bit of pounding. It starts off, we'll break up the grains. A bit of pounding like that, and then as we used to make gamazio by hand as a kid. That's crushing sesame seeds with salt and stuff like that. So you can get into a kind of a meditation and just be thinking about the grain, because then you're going to really. So we're going to ferment them and then be making food. So it's what, and then so you're going to have a relationship with your growing side of it through caramel and your grower, and then how we grow these foods. How you're going to process them, and then what part of it is thought of as waste, and what part of it is going to be a food that we're going to eat. So this is what I'm talking about, how your relationship to the food and the processing of it, and then your role then as a food provider to others to create nutritious food. Do you just keep the sugary white bits, or do you put the nutrients back in? And these are the choices you're going to be making.
Joe, that sounds amazing. Let me just say it back to you to make sure I've understood everything. I've got this bag here. It's the organic Irish rye grain.
Yeah.
I'm going to mill this bag.
Yeah.
The whole of it. And the way I do that is to put 100 grams in here at a time. Start by doing this, then go like that. Once it's done, put it to one side, do the next bit until I finish the whole bag. Is that correct?
Yeah. And it's going to be important that you get it as fine as you can, because it won't ferment if it's still in large pieces. The grains, the bacteria won't be able to get out and ferment. So having a fine flour is going to be important. It'd be more important for you for next time we meet to have 100 grams of fairly well milled fine flour than having a kilo of not very well milled. Because you'll only be using a small bit at the start, and that whole kilo is going to get you through the next 8 weeks. So having a little, like 100 grams of very finely milled is going to help you.
What's more important is that it's really as fine as I can get it for the fermentation.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to sieve it.
No. Okay. That'll be too emotional for doing all that hard work. And then trying to feed it off to animals for someone else to eat and get the nutrients.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fantastic.
And now we have you.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, Julie's back. Let me move some of these things around. Let me do it like this. Okay, you see me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Good, yeah. Okay, great. Brilliant. I'm really excited. This is fantastic. Okay, so my first dance lesson for you. So I thought maybe I would talk to you a little bit about how my process usually goes and get your thoughts on that, particularly because, well, it has to work for both of you, but also I'm aware that, Julie, you're a very experienced practitioner, dance practitioner, and so want to make sure that the process that I'm proposing sits well with both of you. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So usually, I mean, of course, processes change according to context, but usually what tends to happen, the way I work, is that I think less of work as me having an intention, or even you having an intention, but more of, I think more of work as an archaeological excavation. So I often just think to myself, there is a work between yourselves and me that will want to emerge, and what the thing that will want to emerge is the only thing that could emerge from this interaction, you and me, because of who we are, where we are, the conditions. And so
I often see our job as like excavating it, like an archaeological excavation, and find out what it is. And in that way, I'm often surprised by work. It doesn't often come to me as like, oh, that was my intention and this is my expression. It's often like, what? Is this the thing wanting to emerge? And then it's really surprising, and I don't know, it moves me forward. So I just thought I would say that. I also don't, in this process, that I think that the appropriate thing is to kind of create propositions for you to then explore in your own way. So there'll be none or like minimal direct instructions. Obviously, I'm not going to ask you to do like a tendu or a turn or anything like that. You can, but that'll be your decision. Okay, and so far, how does that sit with you, and what kind of thoughts do you have?
Good.
Great.
Okay, great. Okay, so the other thing is that, so initially what I tend to do is to take quite a structural approach, which means that I almost, so I take each element, let's say space, like the space of the bakery, or color, or text, let's say the recipe of creating sourdough bread, or whatever. Let's say sound, I don't know, the sound, recording the sounds of the bread, something like, so I take all these elements and I often ask people to explore them separately with, again, no intention, just like, what are the sounds of the baker? And then people usually go, so I'll be asking you to go on these kind of explorations like this that are not linking together. And sometimes what people say to me, people who work with me, is that it's confusing because we don't know what we're doing. And to be honest, neither do I. But I was just wondering how would you feel about engaging in a process like this, where 1 week I would just say, oh, this week it's all about sound, and I'm going to invite you to record sounds from underneath, from inside the oven, from outside the oven, from underneath the bakery, from singing, from what, and then we see what those things are, and they're not necessarily about the final product. How do you think that will sit with you?
Yeah, you might have difficulty recording inside the oven.
Say again?
We might have a little difficulty recording inside the oven. It never gets cold.
I know. I knew that when I said it. But Joe, wait. I have an idea. What if? So what if we put a microphone inside a loaf of bread, and we put the bread in the oven, and then we just accept that the microphone at some point will burn, and that's the end of the sound. Like, I don't know, maybe that would be possible.
Yeah.
So we just accept we're going to ruin the microphone, as long as the microphone is cloud recording the sound somewhere. Do you see what I mean?
I do. And so if we can remember this process we just went through to making this, so then we're going to remember the process, the amount of energy that goes into making that microphone to destroy it. And are we willing to go to that way of the labor that went into that to destroy someone else's work? So this is why we're looking at these different elements of creation, other people's energy that makes us live in our easy lifestyle to be able to create. So I would have to have a conversation about that. Yeah, would we be willing to do that?
Are you there?
We're there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Okay, great. So maybe we don't destroy a microphone. Okay, but in principle, all these different pathways might be asking you to go into these different pathways, and then I go into something like called the exploding of each one, which is like, so for instance, let's say you both really like a particular recording that you made, and that feels meaningful to us for reasons we might not know, and then it's about really investigating that thing, like excavating it and going, okay, what is this? What does it mean? What could it mean? And then eventually all these things will start layering. And then at some point, maybe like week 7, all like the work will start emerging from the archaeological excavation, and we'll both know what it is. And then the last few weeks, we're actually very intentional. So the last few weeks, no more play, no more playing around with ideas. We're just making it happen. We are on structure, A, B, C, D, we're realizing it as a performance. And then the tech comes in the last week and to help us and everything. So does that feel okay with you? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So let's check. Okay, now, one of the things that is different about this process, so that would be the process that I would utilize if I was making work for a site or a theatre. But this process, you see, we're making something called performance to camera, I would suggest. So performance to camera, so this is something that I've been seeing around since lockdown, people talking about performance to camera, which is this modality of performing where you're not so much choreographing in your bakery, in your site, you're choreographing for the camera, and you're also choreographing the camera in relation to you and in relation to site. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's quite specific. And so it's almost like if the camera is our stage, we can't take it for granted before we begin. And so we have to investigate what is our stage. And so this week, my invitation to you would be to really, before we even start delving into content or any of the elements, would be to delve into what is this as a medium for audiences to experience performance. So I wanted to ask if you could do some explorations around 3 cameras. So the desktop camera you have now on the computer, the relationship between the desktop camera and your phone with the Irion, and what that might bring about. And then I had this idea that maybe I could talk to, I'm not going to mention the person's name because this is going to be public. So until that person says, yes, I don't want to mention that person's name. But you know, the person that we all know who has a drone.
Yeah.
So because Julie, you know, one of the things that has stayed in my mind for ages is when I asked you some time ago for a picture, you sent me a picture of you on the land and you were tiny. Do you know the picture? And I don't know why I have this idea that maybe it could be interesting to, now I don't know how this works. I'll have to talk to that person, whether your phone gets attached to the drone or whether the drone has a camera. But this sense of scale in relation to the land, and maybe you both on the land, and then maybe you picking up the camera, taking it inside into the bakery, or the other way around, like from the tiny little oven to opening it up. So how does that feel? So 3 cameras, drone, Irion, and this desktop camera, and just exploring, like the close-ups that we can do with our eyes, the really far away angles. So not so much looking at content. It doesn't matter what is in the shot. It actually matters how you choreograph the camera.
Yeah, we actually growing up at the allotments as well that Joe planted. So that's a kind of outside connection, and then just thinking about the pathways we map around the eco-village when we're delivering bread and things. So our work isn't just concentrated in here, it does take us outside as well. So we already do have that relationship.
And
with the community.
Yeah, we would still have some timber that we're burning at the moment, which were the trees that were taken down close to the farm, the 3 large trees.
Yeah.
So there's connect. So the energy that goes into them. And our first 50-ton came out of Knocknacree, the woods behind us here when we cleared, when we were getting pinned out around 12 years ago. So the energy that we would be using to provide the food to the local community would all come from the local area, from the local community. Those trees have been planted 150 years ago by the people from generations before, the parents and grandparents of the people still living here. So we have
And
that connection to that.
yes, yeah, Thomas McDonough, who one of the signatories of the proclamation, is a native of Cloughjordan as well. And I remember giving a tour here of the eco village, and I was talking to the students about how old the beech trees are, because the mature beech trees are about 150 to 200 years old. So Thomas McDonough would have been alive when those beech trees were planted and growing, which is an amazing connection.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
When we were talking before about John Berger's book and talking about land being autobiographical, and that's the great thing about what we do here through the bakery, is we do have a relationship to the land and to the woods, and we've got grain growing, and then to the people and community, and
I think thematically, that relationship to the land and that relationship to the work that you both do, which is more than just inside the bakery. I think maybe we could look at just this week, just very practically, a ways of capturing. I mean, I'm even thinking, Julie, do you have a cart that you take around with the bread? Or like, could you attach a phone to the cart, for instance, and just investigate what does that film and what would that be interesting? Things like that are just like scratches of ideas to do with choreographing the camera around your activity as Riot Rye.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting to do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can make just like little films and then keep sending them to me, or if you're going to do it like on one day, just do a few films, send them to me. You can even name them like trial of the cart, trial of this, and I'll speak to that person and see if that person can help as well with the drone, just to see what that would look like as well in relation to one of your activities. But I'll communicate with you, of course. I'll just get that person's yes or no. We'll see. Hopefully that person says yes. So I think if we know what our stage is, like our place of performance in terms of the camera, the relationship between the two cameras. So for instance, I find Irion interesting. I don't understand yet. I haven't played with it enough to understand the relationship between the desktop camera and Irion as a camera. There might be interesting form things that you can find from playing with that as ideas. And then if we come back, hopefully I will have a sense of those ideas. If you send them to me at least a day before our next rehearsal, I'll have a sense of those ideas. We'll have a conversation about them, and then we'll move on to actually exploring the different elements that I was talking about. Sound, text, movement, space, location. We could take it from there.
So just to clarify, we're looking at the relationship so we're talking about performance to camera, which is a very specific thing. So we're starting to explore possibly drone footage and our relationship to how we move in the bakery and around the eco village and wider Cloughjordan, just in terms of looking at our relationship and making little films on that. So it's about spatial pathways, it's about mapping, and just, I guess, particular points that we relate to geographically around the place in the bakery. And
that's really well summarized, Julie. And if I can summarize it back to you, because as you were talking, I was like, okay, I actually understand now what this is. So in terms of the genre, if you want, of performance, is performance to camera. And I'm going to send you an example of what an artist has made from his own house and garden, just so you see how he's constructed it. Right. Performance to camera is the genre. In terms of the tech, is the use of 3 types of cameras: desktop, Irion on the phone, and drone. And in terms of what you're filming, you're right, it's the pathways, the spatial relationships that you have to the bakery, but also to the village during your work. Yeah, does that make sense? I'll write all this down on an email after.
And for you, baking.
Well, I'm just wondering about the relationship I have to my phone and the camera. Like it's very, because I would like film the fire all the time when I post it and I share it globally through Instagram usually. You know, we used to use Twitter. I was pulling loaves out of the oven yesterday. I took a picture of them, you know, with my phone.
Right.
I sent it out publicly, but I tagged in a friend who has been diagnosed with brain cancer over in the UK. The only in Australia, and the only reason that this particular loaf exists in its form, I got rid of these, was because of his input from Australia through this phone, and we talked to each other. And so those relationships I have through filming what I do grows my global community. So I just wonder, you know, so now we're filming it. I don't know if there's anything in that relationship actually to the medium, the film, and what we do here, how we communicate already through our phones and our recording.
And we'll be relaying this project out on social media. So it's a two-way thing. It's not just us sending
Yes.
it's what we get.
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
So it could be really interesting to see what this provokes, what people's responses are internationally in terms of mapping what we do and all the other elements that we look at over the weeks. It'd just be interesting to see what comes back. That could be part of the work as well.
Because although
Absolutely.
these cameras that we are using, not only are we inputting to them, they receive signals from other cameras globally, and they relate other people's images back to us.
Yeah.
So will they engage with the images that we're doing and send back images?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if they're an interesting thing, these cameras and how we use them.
Yeah.
Like we're
Actually, Joe.
Communication now, you know, it's.
Yeah, actually, Joe, you make a really, really, really good point, and it's a really interesting idea. Let me say it back to you, make sure I understood. So one way, particularly you, Joe, you use the camera, is that you do close-ups of the fire, of you doing what you do. So you do all that, you Instagram that. So for this project, you can make little films of that and use the camera as you do. Just for me, just to send me, or to send other people, but to send me too. So there's that. But then you actually saying that your phone is actually a way of two-way communication with your community, the community who follow Riot Rye. And it would be interesting that this isn't just a one-way process, it could be a two-way process. So as part of those categories that I was saying to you when I talk about process, you know, it's text, movement, this, that. One of those categories is that I often use is audience engagement, not because not all works that I'm involved in would have a two-way engagement, but I always have it there just in case there is the potential. And because I was actually looking at that this morning, and because you said what you said, Joe, I think next week when we come back, we should consider that as a possibility. The possibility that during your performance to camera, or maybe slightly before, I mean, we'll talk about it, but you know, like your Instagram is so vibrant, there's so much going on it. It could even be that there's a section of your performance that is in direct response to things that people might have Instagrammed the day before or something. But, you know, at the moment, it's just a big question mark, but I've written what you've said, Joe, and I have it here so that maybe it's a performance to camera that does this. Beautiful.
And just something that's just occurring to me is, like, you're interested in sound, for example, inside the oven. Like, it's amazing when I send out pictures of the fire burning, I always forget that people can hear it as well. And a friend of mine is in a house in Barcelona. They sent out this little video, and then she was like, "Oh wow, that's just a beautiful sound," and I forget that I'm sending out the sound of the fire as well as the video. So just in terms of sounds,
beautiful. Yeah, beautiful, great. So I think, so I'm going to send you this link to this work. I'm going to put all this on an email as well. I've written down all your thoughts as well. So if you're happy, I'm happy. I think I've got enough to get on with for the next week, and you do too.
Mhm.
And yeah, I'll speak to that person so you know if that's part of it or not, and then we'll take it from there.
Excellent. Looking forward to this. Yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.